If you study this very, very carefully and you ignore all the politics, that's what science is supposed to do, and you don't get your hand tied and your mouth completely controlled by the UN mouthpiece, then you will reach the conclusion that quite a substantial part is actually explained by natural component. The more sunlight you have, you will warm. You will evaporate more, and then you will evaporate water vapor. That causes the greenhouse effect. Water vapor is the primary greenhouse gas versus CO2, which is always known in any textbook as a secondary or tertiary greenhouse gas.
Some astronomers tell us global warming has nothing to do with human activity or fossil fuel-driven industrialization. The entire solar system is warming up due to fluctuations in the sun's coronal output.
Carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is a cycle that is driven almost entirely by our sun and has very little to do with human activity.
We have collected data from Mars, from Jupiter, from even out in Neptune. We have actually shown that the sun has melted the Mars ice cap. The sun is warming the whole solar system. And it so happened that Earth is one of the inhabitants of the solar system, period.
We don't see a lot of climate scientists and those talking about climate change and global warming mentioning the fact that there is a proportional increase in temperature on planets where there are no people.
A number of years back, we had climatologists tell us that the world was not warming. It was cooling due to the dimming effect of particulate matter in the atmosphere. With this discovery, the term global warming was converted into the term climate change. Talk about hedging your bets.
Look at the question of particulate matter in the atmosphere. What is the effect of that? How much of it? Where is it moving? What is it? What kind of things are it? Volcanoes. Volcanoes emit carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, sulfur trioxide, carbon monoxide. Think of all the elements and compounds that are emitted. What is that effect?
Whether or not climate change is an existential threat, the United Nations is marching forward and using it to justify the central planning of not only the land, air, and water, but all resources, plants, animals, and humans on the planet, as we discussed earlier.
The global elitists who are currently in power want people to believe that carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, first, is a tremendous problem. And secondly, they want us to believe that the cycle of the amount of carbon dioxide that happens to be in concentrations in our atmosphere is driven by human activity.
The real problem here is that there's a political driving force behind what they call climate change, which is once again the desire of the UN through their general sustainable development theories to gain increasing control over the way industrial society operates. Then you really have a kind of a stranglehold on every country in which the United Nations can exercise this kind of power.
And that is why most governments around the world, because all of them have their totalitarian streak, have gone along so gladly and so readily with the storyline that global warming is going to happen at a rate sufficient to cause danger, and only the government can save the environment from the people.
The solution is always more government control, more taxes, and less freedom for you.
What on earth would a geologist know about climate? The answer is probably more than warmists know. Most geology textbooks, only for the last 200 years, have had about half of the textbook devoted to climate. And we've seen over the history of time, the planet has warmed, the planet has cooled, we've had major ice ages. Every ice age was initiated at a time when there was more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than now. So how can carbon dioxide drive warming? And we've seen periods of time when there's been 1,000 times as much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, yet we've had ice ages. We've seen this carbon dioxide sequestered out of the atmosphere, into rocks, into limey rocks, into coal, into petroleum. And when we look back in time, there's one thing that we see, and that is that carbon dioxide has never driven climate change. And so, in today's world, which is tomorrow's geology, we have to ask the really fundamental question to our warmest friends. Show me that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. That question cannot be answered. Show me that the human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. And of course, if they attempt to, you can say, well, wait a minute, folks. 3% of annual emissions are from human activities. The other 97% are natural, from degassing of the oceans and from volcanoes and bacteria and all sorts of other sources. I'm breathing out 4% carbon dioxide, breathing in 0.04%. So if you can show me that 3% drives global warming, you've got to show me something even more difficult, and that's that the 97% of natural emissions don't drive global warming. So we are dealing with absolute nonsense, and this nonsense has gone on for a very long period of time. And the nonsense is not based on the fundamentals of science, and that is evidence. As soon as one has a contrary view, one's parenthood gets questioned, you get shouted down, you get called all sorts of names, and I don't worry about those. Just show me that the human emissions of carbon dioxide drive climate change, and it hasn't been done.
President Trump. What are you guys going to do when our ocean level rises?
Thank you for asking that question. I have the answer.
No, let me finish.
I have the answer.
Let me finish.
Thank you for the question. Yeah. Okay.
For the first time on Earth, we're changing the gas.
Now you're full of shit. Sit down. I'm going to answer you. I'm going to answer. Shut up and sit down.
No way.
Sit down.
No. I got to finish my question.
I'm going to answer global warming.
All
right, finish the question, then answer.
It's changing on Earth, and it's changing to CO2. What do you people with the money, what are you doing about this? Because
I'm going to tell you right now.
No, I've got children. I've got 21, 23-year-old children. And what's their future with you people with money? You talk about money all of the time.
Okay. Sit down, please. Sit down, please. In the front row. Excuse me. In the front row. Please sit down. Okay, you've asked your question. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to answer.
Excuse me, ma'am. Will you please sit down? Please.
Thank you.
That's okay. Please sit down. Let him answer.
Okay. In 2011, my wife and I were in Antarctica, renewing our vows. For most of you that don't know, Antarctica's on a mountaintop. Okay? And there is a $500 million facility, scientific facility there, and the scientists came to give us presentations about global warming. And they had cores of ice that they had drilled. They had drilled 4,000 or 5,000 cores, and they only brought 15 or 20. So they're going through the second or third core, and they said 275,000 years ago, this was the temperature, blah, 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 blah. And then 55,000 years ago, the world was 2 degrees warmer Celsius than it is today. This is 2011. And, stop. And he said, and I said, well, you mean the whole world? He says, yes. And the poles are only benchmarks. And I said, well, what about the things the young woman alluded to? Okay. And he said, it's all cyclical. And although the gas may have exacerbated it, in the cosmos of time, it's not a fart in the wind. In the cosmos of time, of the 13.8 billion years that we've been on this miserable planet, it's not a fart in the wind. And as I told Joe Rogan on his show, and he said in his infinite wisdom, and Joe, if you hear this, I thank you for the opportunity of being on your show, he said, then in 25,000 years, it's most likely not going to be a problem. Now, my direct answer to your question, if that were really true, which you believe, and let's just for a moment say that it is true. That means that the best scenario vis-a-vis global warming is about 10 feet raise in water. That's the best scenario over the next 40, 50 years. That's the best scenario. The worst scenario is about 100 feet. But let's just take the 10 feet. If the water on the planet is going to rise up 10 feet, that means the southern part of the United States is gone. England is gone. Most of Europe is gone. And I can go, most of Central America is gone. Okay. If that's the case, let's just take Florida, for example, which is one of the fastest growing beachfront condominiums on the planet. In the prospectus, when you invest, there should be, in the footnotes, if global warming is for real, they won't put it that way, global warming happens and water rises 10 feet, this investment you made is fuck all. Not one single investment prospectus written since 2000, this century, has alluded to global warming. Not one motherfucker. If it were really true, the banks wouldn't invest. The banks wouldn't finance. Not one motherfucking condominium. So the people that have the money, and I'm jealous of the Vice President, Gore, which Sally and I rode on a plane from South America with a few years ago. I am jealous he came up with a scam before I did. Because the financial institutions, the banks of this world know it's not going to happen. Otherwise, you couldn't get a goddamn loan in London. You know those 30, 40-year mortgages? The world will be over by then. Is Barclays Bank going to give you a motherfucking loan? With the greatest respect, ma'am, it's the greatest fraud that's been perpetrated on mankind this century.